Judge belittles young man in court, astonished to discover he's a brilliant lawyer in disguise. Judge Albert Mokoena leaned back in his leather chair, tapping a pen against his desk as he gazed over his glasses at the defendant in front of him. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with murmurs, as spectators watched the proceedings unfold in the Johannesburg Magistrates Court. On trial was Mfo Kumalo, a 20-year-old accused of car theft and evading arrest. Standing at the defendant's table, Mfo looked out of place, young, hands in his pockets, and a quiet confidence on his face. But Judge Mokoena's expression showed no sign of respect, only amusement. The charges were severe, but for Judge Mokoena, the real trial wasn't about the law. "You think you know the law, boy?" he asked, his voice laced with condescension. "This isn't one of your debating clubs." A wave of laughter spread through the room. Court officials, the prosecutor, even the bailiff. Mfo didn't flinch. This was the moment he had unknowingly prepared for his whole life. Raised by a single mother, Mfo had learned the intricacies of law from his mom, Nomvula Kumalo, a legal secretary who worked for one of the top law firms in Johannesburg. Mfo absorbed everything he heard at home. Stories of unethical prosecutors, lazy defense attorneys, and biased judges. By the age of 16, Mfo could break down legal arguments better than some law students. Still, none of that seemed to matter to Judge Mokoena. To him, Mfo was just another troubled youth. Prosecutor Shear Dlamini, known for his ruthless style, stood up with the confidence of a man who had already won. His suit was flawless, his delivery smooth as he addressed the judge, outlining the state's case. "Your Honor, we have overwhelming evidence that Mr. Kumalo was caught red-handed in a stolen Mercedes-Benz. Officers pursued him through the streets of Soweto, where he attempted to flee." The prosecutor's words were calculated, painting a damning picture of Mfo. Judge Mokoena glanced at Mfo, unimpressed. He turned to Mfo's defense attorney, who had barely spoken a word since the trial began. The lawyer shifted nervously before beginning to speak, but Mfo quietly placed his hand on her arm, signaling her to stop. "Your Honor," Mfo said, stepping forward, "I'll be representing myself." The room fell silent. The gallery buzzed with whispers, and even Prosecutor Dlamini couldn't hide his smirk. "This should be entertaining," Dlamini muttered, but it wasn't long before the smiles disappeared. Mfo took a deep breath, hands still in his pockets, and looked directly at the judge. "Before we proceed, I'd like to clarify something with the prosecution." Dlamini raised an eyebrow, motioning for him to continue. "You mentioned Officer Sifo Masiko's testimony, stating he personally saw me behind the wheel, correct?" Dlamini, looking bored, confirmed with a nod. "That's right." Mfo nodded thoughtfully. "And that's recorded in his official report." Again, Dlamini confirmed. Mfo then turned to Judge Mokoena. "Your Honor, I move to dismiss that testimony. Officer Masiko couldn't have seen me in the car because he wasn't on duty during the chase." Confusion rippled through the gallery, and the prosecutor stiffened, a hint of uncertainty creeping into his polished demeanor. "I'd like to request Officer Masiko's duty logs and GPS data to verify his whereabouts at the time of the chase," Mfo continued, his voice calm and calculated. The prosecutor hesitated for just a moment, long enough for the jury, and more importantly, the judge, to notice. "No objections, Your Honor," Dlamini said, his tone more strained than before. The room was no longer laughing. The gallery had grown tense, as Mfo picked apart the prosecution's narrative layer by layer. Prosecutor Dlamini attempted to regain control, pointing out that Mfo's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel of the stolen vehicle. Mfo nodded, unshaken. "That's true," he said, "but let's think about that evidence logically. If you try on a jacket in a store and later someone steals that jacket, does that make you guilty simply because your fingerprints are on it?" A few jurors exchanged glances, the logic cutting through the prosecutor's case. Mfo continued, "I was at a petrol station with my friends before the car was stolen. I leaned on the car and opened the door out of curiosity. It was already unlocked, but touching something doesn't make me a criminal." Judge Mokoena raised an eyebrow and Mho pressed forward. "Let's talk about the fingerprint analysis. Was the forensics specialist called to testify?" The prosecutor paused. "No," Mho nodded again. "So, the state wants to convict me based on evidence I can't even challenge. No opportunity to question the chain of custody or the accuracy of the report." The prosecutor's once steady composure began to unravel. Mho wasn't done. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit an official statement from the owner of the vehicle, Mr. Peter Sithole, who confirmed to the police that the person he saw take his car was not me." Mho paused before continuing. "In fact, he described the thief as a white male." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The prosecutor's case was collapsing, and Mo had exposed the cracks. In a final attempt to salvage the trial, Dlamini argued, "The defendant was found walking near the abandoned vehicle," but Mfo shook his head. "No, I was walking home with my friends after buying snacks. I wasn't running, and I wasn't anywhere near the car." The courtroom grew heavy with silence as the weight of Mfo's words sank in. Judge Mokoena sighed, rubbing his temples, and looked toward the prosecutor. "Do you have anything further?" Dlamini's face was flushed, his confidence drained. "No, Your Honor." After a long pause, Judge Mokoena spoke the words that would change everything. "Case dismissed." The gallery erupted, some in disbelief, others in quiet relief. Reporters furiously took notes, but Mfo remained still, letting the moment sink in. As he turned to leave, Judge Mokoena's voice stopped him. "Mr. Kumalo," the judge said, his tone softer now, "you should consider a career in law." Mfo smiled faintly as he walked out. He didn't need to consider it. He was already on his way. Outside, the air was electric with voices. Reporters swarmed around Mfo, their cameras flashing, asking him about his future. Mfo pulled his hoodie over his head, ignoring the questions. This wasn't about proving himself. It was about something bigger. His mother, Nomvula, waited for him at the bottom of the courthouse steps. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. "Mfo," she said softly, "you scared me half to death." Mfo chuckled. "I had to take a chance, Ma." She sighed, pulling him into a tight hug. "You always were the stubborn one." As Mfo and his mother left the courthouse, Judge Mokoena watched from a distance, his usual arrogance gone. His expression was one of quiet reflection. This case had started like any other, but it ended with him questioning the system he thought he knew so well. Mfo had forced the courtroom to look in the mirror, and for the first time, it blinked. How many other cases had gone this way? How many young men had been convicted not because of real evidence, but because of assumptions, shortcuts, and a broken system? Mo had the knowledge to fight back, but what about the others who didn't? This trial was just the beginning for him. Next time, he wouldn't be the defendant. He'd be the lawyer fighting for justice. If this story resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge the system and open up conversations that matter.